Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am. Boom, 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 boom.
Let's do it. So let's start with this question from Patrick Earwood. Interesting question. What's more likely to happen? One, Audric Estime and Logan Diggs both go for 1,000 rushing yards, or two, Sam Hartman wins the Heisman Trophy.
So I'm quickly trying to look at where Audric Estime finished last year in terms of
He had a little
rushing
over
yards.
900, and Diggs had a little over 800. So they were both within like 170 yards, I think, of 1,000.
Here's what I'm gonna say. I think if one happens, two happens, and if I think two happens, then one happens. I think they all happen or none of them happen. How about that?
Ooh,
I'm
interesting.
Yeah, so I'm on the boat of, well, okay. One is like more likely to happen than two, but I think if one can really be effective, that means two is being really effective, and vice versa. So, Chris Tyree, if things go to plan, he's not going to even get as many straight touches out of running back. So that's going to give you more touches to them first and foremost. And then with the better passing game, I think the running game opens up more as well. I think you'll see bigger holes. And like I said just a little bit earlier, just because they're not running as many times, I still think that the yards per carry will still be pretty similar.
The gist of what you're saying, I agree with. But here's the wrinkle. Part of why you have the luxury of moving Chris Tyree to receiver is because you have a guy who might have been your top running back last year had he not blown out his Achilles, and that's Jadarian Price, who was a freshman last year. Now, he had the big spring. Now, we've seen guys have big springs, and that doesn't translate into seasons, but just with the kind of, again, speed and skill that he has, I'm going to say Hartman winning the Heisman just because I think only one of the two specific guys mentioned, Audric and Diggs, gets to 1,000. But because of Jadarian Price, I think that's going to do what you were talking about. It's going to take some of the touches away from somebody else. So I do think that you're going to have three guys more consistently in the mix this year. So I'm going to say I don't think two guys get to 1,000 because of the fact that if Jadarian Price is healthy and doing what we saw from him last spring, then he's going to be a big factor for this team. And that's only going to be a good thing. And that just means that, you're not going to have one or two guys taking all this pounding. You're going to have three guys who can really shoulder the load, and you can do some different things with them. So I say because of Price, you're not going to see, you might not even see one 1,000-yard rusher again, but you're going to see three guys with a ton of production, and then you throw Tyree into the mix as well. So I'm going to go with Hartman as my answer just because of that.
Okay, I like that.
All right. So let's go back to Jared Parker here for a second. He talked about the tight end room without Michael Mayer. We've heard a lot of different comments from him. And so here's what he says about what that tight end room is shaping up right now without Mayer in it.
The good thing is they got a real good glimpse of it through 15, 16 practices, whatever it was for the bowl game and playing in the bowl game. And they just feel a huge obligation to the history and tradition of the tight end room. The guys that are still playing the NFL, the guys of the past that have played the NFL and or put this golden helmet on long before I got here and will happen long after, there's an obligation to play at a high level at the tight end position here. I know that. I've got the responsibility of it. They know it. And they feel it in a very positive way to make sure they play at a high level because that's the standard here at Notre Dame.
So my question to you, Jess, is scale of 1 to 10. What is your concern level with the Irish tight end position room post Michael Mayer and with both Eli Raridan and Kevin Bauman recovering from injuries right now?
Yeah, so just without Michael Mayer, I would put my concern, somewhere around probably like a 5 or 6. But then when you consider kind of the guys that are going to be filling in the shoes are coming back from injuries, that kind of gets ticked up to, a little bit of a 7 or an 8. But the reassuring part of it is kind of what Parker talked about in that little audio snippet is, this is Notre Dame still, and there is a long tradition of, good tight ends and the development of tight ends and things like that. So I think naturally it's in good hands, but there's still a good amount of concern considering the level that Michael Mayer was putting playing at, and where he sets the bar, and then considering these guys are coming back from injury. So yeah, I landed a pretty solid 7 of concern, and I
Oh,
think
wow.
that's hard to say just because of like what you're comparing it to, just the caliber at which Michael Mayer played at. It's setting a pretty high bar, and I don't think that either of these guys are going to realistically come close to playing at that same level that Michael Mayer was. But that's not a knock against them. It's just Michael Mayer is really good, and that's going to be shown in this year's draft. And both of these guys are coming back from knee injuries too, so it's just there's a lot kind of going into it. So yeah, I'm at a solid 6 or 7.
Wow. So yours is pretty high. I'd only put mine around a 2 or a 3. We're at opposite ends of the spectrum on this thing. I mean, is there going to be a drop off without Michael Mayer at the tight end position? Of course there is. But again, I think that you're still going to see really good tight end play. You obviously the hope is that Raritan and Bauman are both back by the fall, and I think it sounds like that's what they're planning on right now. There's no sense pushing them back too early in the spring from ACL tears and surgeries and all that kind of stuff. Evans is still a pretty good tight end, so is Stays. And you got Cooper Flanagan, the freshman coming in, who's like pretty good size, 6'5", 239 himself. So you're going to have some good talent in the room because of the positions that we just talked about, both with what you're going to get from the running backs and what you're going to get. I think you're going to get much increased production from the wide receivers this year. I think it's going to offset, the just the receiving production of Michael Mayer. You're still going to have really good tight end play. It's obviously not going to be what it was with Michael Mayer, but my concern is not great because I think you're still going to have really good, consistent, solid tight end play, and just increased production from the receivers is going to more than help, and the quarterback is going to more than offset what you're going to lose with Michael Mayer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that, like, in terms of overall kind of health of the offense, I'm not too concerned. But again, just kind of using last year as the comparison and knowing, what that play was like, there's obviously going to
Sure.
be, some drop off. So I guess
Sure.
that was kind of where I was coming from.
I got you. Fill in the blank. Speaking of tight ends, it's blank that Kevin Bauman says Jared Parker has some swagger to him now that he's offensive coordinator.
It's good to hear because I think that shows you, like, how do I say it? Like, if Parker's not getting hyped up and taking on the challenge every day and having confidence in himself, then it's just like, what's even the point? Because as a person, and especially in the industry that he's in, like there's you're always taking on new challenges and new responsibilities and those sort of things. And so when you want your players to play at a high level, a confident level, then you yourself need to have that confidence and swagger about you. So to me, I love that he has that energy. I think it's just a great thing to be able to exude that confidence and swagger, especially if you want other people to kind of follow what you're saying and what you're trying to get through to them.
I think so as well, and I think it's a good confidence and swagger. It's not like, look at me, I'm the great, like that kind of thing. I think it's like he's feeling it a little bit. He's got this promotion. He's at Notre Dame. He's running the show now, and so I think that is nothing but a good thing to exude that and have your players feed off of that. And again, I think that they seem to be drawn to that kind of energy. There's a lot of positive energy, I think.
Well, I mean, just like honestly, today's generation of athletes, like they like seeing that in their coach. Like, I don't
right.
know if you saw as much as Kansas State obviously not is a big rival of Kansas. So, whatever. But before the games, the Kansas State coach would put on this, music by this guy called Lil Baby, and I'm sure not a lot of people would listen to it in their free time, but the players love it. It got them focused. You see them clapping along. You see, the head coach. I can't think of his name right now. It's slipping my
Jerome
mind.
Tang? Are you talking
Jerome
about
Tang getting into
basketball?
his
Okay.
getting into his little groove a little bit. So it's just, again, it's just something that, minor things that players enjoy and catch on to, and allows them to kind of
Yeah.
build their confidence in you because you're showing your vulnerability to them. Like, you don't know anything about Lil Baby music, so like, what's like what's the why go in there and try to dance? And it's just, again, a way to relate to the players and make them feel confident and to get everyone kind of on the same page. So I like that he brings that kind of energy and passion because he's showing to his players that that he can be trusted and he's going to bring it every day.
Yeah, Sark has energy. Matthew says Sark has plenty of energy and passion. We see how awful they perform every year. But maybe it's just because Sark is a bad coach. Like, no one's figured that out yet. I mean, he's got a track record at this point, right? Like, there's a difference. I'll just leave it at that. So the Final Four is set. The two semifinals are going to be UConn versus Miami and San Diego State versus Florida Atlantic. Do you buy or sell the less than blue-blooded Final Four is good for college basketball?
I do buy this. I do buy this, and I don't buy it for like every single year. And maybe we're seeing a transformation in blue bloods. Maybe we'll never see the same consistency of true bloods. And I think the transfer portal has a lot to do with that because guys, good players who aren't necessarily finding their fit, or maybe a coach leaves and the new system isn't a fit. Whatever the reason is, right, that they're entering the transfer portal. I think a lot of good players on a year-to-year basis are going there and just getting into schools and kind of going, under the radar. And like, that's what you're seeing a lot of, I feel like, is just that gap has been bridged by the transfer portal. And so instead of, blue bloods kind of hoarding all these great players, you're seeing a lot of kind of good to average players bounce around to teams. And when you can assimilate those guys and get a good coach like you did in the Kansas State situation. I mean, they only brought back 2 guys from last year's roster and they made it to the Elite 8. I think that's a prime example of showing, what the transfer portal is capable of. So I sell it because I enjoy seeing new teams in there. I like the variety, but then again, I like seeing some of those traditional programs in there too. Like, I like seeing Kansas in there. I hate Duke, but Duke is good for college basketball. I like seeing them making late runs into the tournament. So I'm more of it a sell of it this year because I like the fact that we haven't seen this kind of Final Four in a long time. Like, we see like 2 5s, a 4, and a 9. And I can't remember the last time you've seen something like that. So I don't know if I'd be up for it every year. I think a nice mix every year would be kind of, what I would like the best.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I don't know that it's I agree with everything you're saying. The transfer portal has a huge part to doing it, and you're absolutely right. Like Kansas State, look how far they got, and it's, I mean, like, we're looking close to home. It's part of what's so frustrating about the fact that everyone else can take advantage of the transfer portal, but Notre Dame is stuck with unathletic fifth-year guys, and look at what they did in the ACC this year, and I think that it's good to the extent that, like, to me, the most fun part about the NCAA tournament, and I think what's the most fun part about the tournament to most people, is all the upsets in the first round. But typically it's like, a handful of teams gets to the Sweet 16 as like St. Peter's last year or whatever, double-digit seeds. They get to the Sweet 16, maybe they push as far as the Elite 8, but by then they're out, and they like very rarely. Unless it's Virginia Commonwealth or George Mason before that. And it's hard to believe it's already been almost 20 years since I think George Mason with Jim Larinaga made their push to the Final Four that year. I think it was 2004. But, like, they're usually done before they get to the Final Four. So to see all these, like, you've got one Power 5 program in the Final Four. It's obviously not a blue blood, Miami, but it's far from a traditional basketball power. It's Miami, so I think it's fun to at least see some new blood in there because, last year was blue blood central. You had Kansas, Villanova, and Duke, Carolina in the semifinals. And now 6 people, or one in about every 600,000 brackets, predicted this Final Four correctly. That's just insane, where we are right now. And so congratulations, like to Georgian accounting and Grandma Gertrude and the guy who never watches college basketball and girl who picks the winners based on the uniform colors and like 5 or 6 year old kid who like the mascots make him laugh and so that's what they picked, and your dog maybe made your picks as well for that matter. That's who got the brackets right to this point. So at the very least, it's more fun. I will be curious to see what it turns out ratings wise, because even though Alabama and Houston are far from blue bloods, they were number 1 seeds. And when again, like what typically happens is these brackets start falling apart and it paves the way for those kind of schools as number 1 seeds to get into the Final Four, and they couldn't even make it, so I'll be really curious to see, because UConn is the closest thing right now to a college basketball power. And no one was expecting them to do it. They're a 4 seed themselves. Honestly, I think that's probably who's going to end up winning this whole thing, just the way these teams have played, But like, look at who's going to play for a national championship. Either San Diego State or Florida Atlantic are going to be in the national championship game a week from today. Think about that, because that they're playing each other in the semifinal. That is just nuts to think about that. And you could have an all Miami area final for that matter. And because I hadn't really thought about it, but like Florida Atlantic is obviously right there in that Miami area. Like you could have an all Miami area national championship game a week from today. That'd be nuts too.
Yeah, I like I'm with you. I think UConn just on both sides of the ball, like a composite score, they're the best in the country. Like San Diego State, not best in the country, sorry, best with the Final Four. But San Diego State has really good defense. I don't like their struggle is offensively if they can keep up. So if they, assuming they beat Florida Atlantic and UConn would win, I just think that UConn's offense would outweigh kind of San Diego State's offense at that point. But to me, the wild card in the whole thing is Miami's, and because they can get hot. I mean, see what they did, last night to come back and beat Texas out of nowhere.
Just wait till the last 10 minutes of the game. I thought the Texas Miami game was over in the burnt orange favor, and Miami just last 10 minutes of the game, just sit back and wait and see what happens.
It was funny. I was
watching.
I was on the phone last night with Grandpa, and he was watching the game, and I was out running an errand. He was like, "Yeah, Texas is winning." And I was like, "Oh, it's over." And he's like, "Well, it's college basketball. You never know. There's still 10 minutes left." And sure enough, I clicked over and saw that Miami won. Not even that they won, but they won by like 8 or 9. And I was like, "Good Lord, how did this just switch out of nowhere all of a sudden?"
I know. They literally just came right back from the dead, and there they were, and they're in the Final Four now. It's just nuts. So fouls have been an issue during the tournament. Gary Parrish from CBS Sports tweeted the other day that fouls rarely impact NBA stars in games the way they do college stars in games. Does college basketball have a foul problem, Jesse?
Yes, I've moaned and groaned about this, and to me, it doesn't make sense. NBA guys get 6 fouls. Yes, they play, a little bit longer in terms of total minutes, but how are college guys getting less foul opportunities? Like they're not pros yet. So obviously, to me, it makes more sense to give the college guys more fouls, and not even that, but
I agree.
Like, that the college game isn't as skilled and refined. So yeah, there's I think naturally going to be more fouls, but like the stuff that I always hate are like the fouls off the screens and like the foul, like just the little stuff. I just feel like it's so nitpicky, and in so many of these games, like the Tennessee and Duke game, and just like a game off the top of my head, and then there was another game, I think like the after Furman won. So in the round of 32, like star players are picking up foul trouble, before even halftime. And so then you're forced to sit out some of your star players. Other teams are going on runs. And I mean, not to make excuses, but the women ran into a lot of foul trouble against Maryland yesterday, and that's what sparked Maryland to go on a run that Notre Dame couldn't keep up with. I mean, Notre Dame had 3 girls with 5 fouls yesterday, and it's just I don't get it. It's
Saturday, but
it felt a lot ticky tack. And to me, at the college level, if you're going to keep fans interested, the best players need to be playing. And I don't think that means you overlook calls, but let's not maybe get so nitpicky on some of these kind of smaller fouls.
The over officiousness, the over officiating, whatever. It's like there's just too much to it. I agree. I think it's worth looking at adding a 6th foul, because you watch a lot more NBA than I do. And there's a podcast or two that I listen to where, like, one of the guys has talked about the fact that he doesn't watch that much college basketball because he thinks that, the skills and the fundamentals are so poor. And like that leads to some of these fouls that we're talking about as well. I do wonder, with the proliferation of the transfer portal, how much that plays into it as well, because you're adding all these new guys all the time, and even if they're veterans, like you're coaching them into your system maybe more than you're coaching fundamentals, like you might be early, you know what I mean? Like I wonder how much that might have to do with it. I definitely think that there is an over officiating problem, though. Just what you're talking about, there are too many fouls being called.
Well, no one wants to see the star player sitting out in
exactly
these games.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And I just thought I was actually on a really long walk on Saturday when you were doing the Maryland game. So it was nice because even though it was on ESPN, I was just listening to the radio broadcast, and I chuckled to myself at one point because I'm not kidding you. It felt like every Maryland possession was a foul there for like 4 or 5 possessions in a row. Just felt like they were getting bailed out every time with the whistle. And I just remember you making a comment that a Maryland girl stiff-armed a Notre Dame girl going for a loose ball. She falls down, and then there's no call on that.
Yes,
she literally. That's the other issue is where
it was literally fairness? Like a Heisman pose. The way she stiff-armed. I can't remember who she stiff-armed but it's like, come on. And I don't know.
And then Sonia Citron goes down because she's getting fouled a little hard. It's just, like what? It felt like the teeter-totter wasn't balanced in that game. And that's the other issue. I don't appreciate over-officiating one side. And then the other side, you see some bodies fall, and all of a sudden there's no whistle.
Right. And Maryland players, it's not all flopping, but like Cheyenne Sellers.
I heard you trying to allude this in the nicest way that they are good at the art
like
of
Karen Keys, who does the games with me, didn't want to go there, but like they know how to, get that contact, and they were getting calls. Like they were, even though they're not all, I wouldn't say, quote unquote floppers. They know how to lean in, and even, whether they're playing offense or defense, they're always looking for that contact to try to get a foul called. And they apparently did their job. They got a lot of it Saturday. A lot.
And that's ultimately just what it felt like. And it was so unfortunate because that game was so back and forth and so close there. But as soon as Notre Dame's forwards, and really with the offense that Maryland runs and the pressure, those forwards are your only hope, because the point guards can only do so much before they have to get the ball off and allow someone to slash. Well, your centers and your power forwards aren't going to do a lot of that. And so when your forwards go out and you're in foul trouble and you're already down, your starting point guard, it's going to be hard to move the ball around and score. And it felt like, unfortunately, that's what the women's team ran into.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it's going to look a lot different next year, because they're going to have 2 point guards. They're going to have, other guards as well, Sonia Citron and KK Bransford, and, that whole front court. Like, you're going to have Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo, and they're also bringing in Rish, a good 3-point shooter from down in Florida. So it's going to look a lot different next year. Some folks
already
better be
excited.
ready to go. Yeah. Yep. All right. NFL owners are going to vote this week. They're doing the NFL owners meetings this week. They're going to vote this week to possibly allow flex scheduling for Thursday night NFL games. It would allow Amazon to shift games in weeks 14 through 17 of the season from Sunday to Thursday night with 15 days notice to allow them to schedule teams on a Thursday after a Sunday game twice during the season instead of just once. Do you buy or sell this idea?
So I buy this in terms of a consumer standpoint. I wouldn't buy this on, sorry, I buy this on a consumer standpoint of getting good games, on those couple Thursdays of the year. But as a player, I sell it because I just don't feel like it's ultimately fair, because there's already issues with these guys playing on Thursdays as is. You know what I mean? You see a lot of guys not liking it. There's always, the risk of injury because you're on a shorter week. And I get it, you're still getting 15 days. But again, I just as on the player side of it, they already hate Thursday games. So having to play 2 in one season, I just feel like it's not ideal. So I feel like the NFLPA will not really be on board with this. Obviously the owners and Amazon, all of them will love it. And I'll tell you, Al Michaels and Kirk will love this because it felt
they'll
like
love it.
every Thursday was a bad game for them. But yeah, it's as selfish as it sounds as a consumer. I love the idea because we're going to get better Thursday games towards the end, right? Better matchups. You're not just getting crappy ones. But as a player, I would not want to get a 15-day notice. I got to play on another Thursday.
No, and especially after you already have to do it once during the season. And then if they start flexing these games, that means that some teams aren't even going to have to play one Thursday game, and others are going to have to play 2 Thursday games on a short week.
Right.
I don't know if they've really considered that.
If you're a Cowboys fan, do you potentially get 3 then? Because they always play on Thanksgiving. They got to play the Thursday after Thanksgiving. So can they get flexed into a third possible game on these last 3 weeks of the season?
Come on. Do we really care that much about Thursday games and trying to give Amazon?
Yeah, I thought the whole purpose was just to expand to another day just so you could claim that day. I don't, at this point, who cares what that game is because you still own the whole day to yourself.
Here's my problem with it. Like you said, from a consumer point, it's good, but let's say that you and I have tickets to a Cowboys game.
Oh, wow, that's a good point.
And we've been planning. It's in December, and we've been planning all season. We bought our tickets. We bought not only our game tickets, but our airfare and the whole thing. And we've been planning on a Sunday game. And then 2 weeks before the game, they say, it's going to be on Thursday instead. Like, how is that good for anybody? I realize the majority of the people who go to those games are going to be from local or whatever, but even you're still going to have some people who are going to drive a couple of hours, and there's a big difference driving on a Thursday night compared to a Sunday.
Well, yeah, especially you got to get those days off of work now
and hotel rooms booked and all that stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, I not a good idea. I'm a complete sell on it at this point.
Right, and obviously you can apply this to any team, not just the Cowboys. I'm just using that as an example, obviously, because as everyone knows, that's who we're fans of. But yeah, you're right, Anthony. There's the nightly Cowboys plug. It's been a while. We've laid off since the NFL season is over. But you could be like I said, you could be a fan of any team, and you could apply that. Look, like the Kansas City Chiefs. So now the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have to play extra Thursday night games, and someone's going to have to travel from Chicago to Kansas City to see it. There's a big difference when you start shifting games from Sunday to Thursday. That would bug me. On 15 days notice. That's right. I mean, since we're talking to Notre Dame fans, just imagine, this is probably never going to happen, but just imagine if you're a Notre Dame fan and you've got tickets for Notre Dame versus USC. It's supposed to be on a Saturday, and then all of a sudden they a couple weeks before the game they say nope, it's going to be on Thursday instead. Think of the disruption that would cause in the whole infrastructure. From hotel rooms to book flights and everything else. Big difference.
Big difference.
All right, fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame baseball won its first ever home series over Louisville this weekend?
I want to say shocking, but then I started to dig into it, and so let's assume Notre Dame made the switch in like 2012 to the ACC. So that's really there. Obviously Louisville was not a part of the Big East, in which they were playing them, 3-game
No, they were.
sets.
They were part of the Big East.
That's that's a good
Oh,
point,
wow.
actually. And so, now that I do think of it, so we're talking Big East and ACC. It is completely shocking that they've never won a home series. And Louisville has been good at baseball, and they're consistently one of the better teams year in and year out of baseball. But I mean, Notre Dame has had its seasons too, and it's not like they're just dog crap every year. So the fact that it's taken them this long to win a home series against Louisville, to me, is pretty shocking. But I think it's kind of the turning point that this team needed, because they haven't. This is their first home series of the year. I think getting Louisville to come on kind of a cold weekend obviously played to their advantage a little bit. I don't know about it is not fun playing baseball in the cold, especially as a hitter where you get jammed and that metal bat vibrates in your hands. So they had that working for them. So I do think it's pretty shocking overall, but I'm excited for them, because I think this is kind of their turning point in the season. Guys, the bats are starting to wake up a little bit. I think they had like back-to-back home runs in that game 2 against Louisville. And then at least another, 3-4 home runs in a game altogether. So again, swinging point for me, but pretty shocking that it's taken this long, and especially this season, because this is kind of a rebuild in all terms of roster and coaching. And Louisville was the number 2 team in the country going into this weekend.
That's the biggest part of it. And look at what Anthony was saying. This team is 12-9 now after the series win over Louisville. Last year's team went 41-17 and lost the Louisville series, and of course still made it to the College World Series, and Louisville didn't. But that's what's amazing is Notre Dame has obviously been really good the last couple of years. And remember, they split that series, I think it was a couple of years ago, and they ended up canceling one of the games. And Dan McDonnell, the Louisville coach, of course, got all ticked off about it, because of weather and all that stuff, because that's what he does. He gets ticked off. But
I was going to say, your favorite you love the Louisville coaches on just women's basketball.
That's very true.
Baseball.
That's very true. They've all got their baggage. Let's just put it that way. But I mean, when you think about it, the only thing that's shocking is I think it was Paul Maneri's last year in 2006. They played Louisville. I think it was Louisville had just come into the Big East, and Louisville was not that good yet at that point. And that team, that Notre Dame team that went to the NCAA tournament that year in Maneri's last year, lost that series to Louisville at home. And of course, the next few years were really lean. Next several years were really lean for Notre Dame. And in the meantime, Louisville became a national player. So it's not shocking that Notre Dame didn't win series at that point, just because of the disparity. And Louisville was so much better than Notre Dame. But it is kind of crazy that we're sitting here in 2023, I think 17 years after that first time that Louisville came in, and this is the first time they've won a series. And you're right. Hopefully this is a turning point for Notre Dame, because it looks like maybe things have come together a little bit, and it also maybe coincides a little bit with Findlay finally getting into the starting rotation.
I was getting ready to say, I hope you noticed that, because I know you've been asking for it, and he went 5 or 6 innings with 9 Ks the other day.
Yes, he did.
And that's, I mean, coming from the left side, you need that mix up in your 3-day rotation.
Yep. He has done really well. He was a freshman All-American last year, and he's still doing really well right now. So hopefully that continues for him. All right, Jess, great stuff. I think fans appreciated your somewhat impromptu whiteboard tonight.
Yes, tell your friends, download the podcast, do what you need to do, but a whiteboard did make an appearance today.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. All right, well, safe travels to you, and I will see you soon. Vince will be in the next few days, and we'll do we'll do Sean and Vince stuff, I guess, and you'll be heading off to Chicago for some Cubs baseball.
I'll try to stay warm while drinking my Goose Islands.
There you go. All right. Have a good night. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for being with us tonight on IB Nation Sports Talk.